Bryan Thrift here, and I want to show you a technique that's becoming very popular over the last 2 or 3 years. I'm going to call it the micro jig movement. It's something that gets a lot of bites in a lot of different pressured situations. You know, everybody loves to throw a jig, and a jig's known for catching a lot of big fish. So why not make a smaller jig, a finesse style jig that you can get a lot of bites on, still catch a lot of big fish, and still feel like a man because you're throwing a jig. That's the number one thing. That's why does anybody throw a jig? Because you feel like a man. I'm gonna set the hook, put them in a boat with that jig. So we got a Finesse micro football jig. This is my new signature series jig from Fitzgerald Fishing. It's a micro football jig. It's available in 3/8, ½ ounce, and 3/4 ounce. I've got a 3-inch Damiki Air Craw on this one. And you can see just kind of how it's just a nice little compact jig. It's hand tied, it's got a great keeper on it, and it's tied with the Finesse rubber, Finesse silicone rubber, so it gives it a tighter, compact look and just maintains that nice finesse-y appeal to it. So I'm going to go through the setup I use for throwing finesse jigs, the different situations I throw it in, when it shines, and tell you, just about some experiences that I've personally had with this jig and where I've seen it outshine other jigs or even other presentations such as a shaky head or a Ned rig. So let's get into the setup first. Again, this is the Fitzgerald Micro Finesse football jig. And if you've got a micro jig, you want a micro jig rod. So last year I designed a new rod for my signature series with Fitzgerald. This is the Micro Jig Rod. It's a 7.3 medium action, and I'm going to explain to you why I like this longer rod with a medium action even though I'm using a jig, and I'll go into some more components on the actual jig and stuff itself as to why you need a medium action rod. So first off, if you're throwing a finesse jig, obviously you're fishing clear water, finesse situations, places that, it's hard to get bit on a regular size jig, so you need to downsize. So that's what we did with this jig. We've got a light weed guard on it, a light wire 3/0 Mustad hook, and for that reason, I'm throwing it on light line, 10 and 12 pound P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon. So I want a long rod with a soft tip, hence the medium action, so I can set the hook on those fish and not worry about breaking fish off on a hook set with that 10 and 12 pound fluorocarbon. Even though this jig's crawling over rocks, your lines may be getting compromised, this setup is perfect for handling that. The 7.3 medium action, I can crawl this jig on rocks deep, 25, 30 feet, give it all the abuse of a regular size football jig and still land those fish due to the line, rod, and reel. The reel I use is Abu Garcia Revo STX 7.3 gear ratio. I like this kind of middle of the road speed gear ratio reel when I'm fishing a jig because it's slow enough that I can do everything I want to do, dragging wise. I'm not going to take up too much line. I'm not going to impart too much action when I need a finesse presentation, but it's also fast enough that if I make a super long cast and I'm ready to wind it in, I can get that bait back to the boat quickly and make another cast. So before I get into the different scenarios and targets I'm looking for with the micro finesse football jig, I'm going to show you some of my favorite trailers and why I use each and what color combinations. So I've got 4 main trailers that I use depending on the type of forage or bait that I'm trying to imitate. So this micro football jig, you can imitate anything from shad, crawfish, gobies, and just pretty much anything with it, bluegill. But the most common is your typical crawfish style trailer. So I've got, the one I was showing earlier, this has got the 3-inch Damiki Air Craw on it. I really like this when I'm dragging that bait slow and I don't want a whole lot of action. So now I'm going to show you how I fish it, some tips and techniques on how I work the bait, from dragging it to hopping it, stroking it, all the different things you can do to utilize this tool to help you get more bites. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. First thing I'm going to do when I fire my cast out is I want this jig to maintain bottom contact pretty much all of the time, unless I hop it real high off the bottom or something like that. So I'm going to let the bait go all the way to the bottom, and once it makes contact, I'm just going to start a slow, steady wind, or a slow, steady drag. I want to count every rock. I want to feel everything down there on the bottom. I want it just kind of down there meandering around like a crawfish would do naturally. So I've got the 3-inch Damiki Air Craw on here now. We're just gonna crawl it around, drag it real slow. Just count the bottom, feel it come over all those rocks, and just maintain that constant bottom contact. Then every once in a while, I'll give it a quick twitch or a quick hop, just to make that bait jump up off the bottom, just to give it a little bit more action in case there's a fish down there following it or that's maybe kind of reluctant to bite. Just one quick little twitch and just pop it up in the air like that, let it fall back down. And I don't do that all the time, but I would say maybe once a cast I'll do that. Just, I'll fire it out there, drag it halfway back to the boat, and then just kind of give it a little pop. Or if I feel a really good feeling rock and I let it sit there for a few seconds and crawl it and nothing bites, after I know I've come over the piece of structure, I'll pop that jig up just to try to pop it up in one's face and get them to commit to it and get them to bite it. This is, it's one of the funnest, most effective ways to catch fish that are really deep. Like this spot we're fishing right here, we're setting in 38 feet and we're fishing 25 to 30 feet right here. So just some scattered rock and just good hard bottom out on a point. And that is the perfect scenario for a football jig, any football jig actually, but this Finesse football jig really shines when you've got clear water and pressured fish in situations like this. There we go. Got us one on the football jig. There we go. 1/2 ounce Fitzgerald micro football jig with a 3-inch Damiki Air Craw, out here dragging on some offshore rocks, just a slow, steady drag, getting bit. We've got the high, bright sun, high pressure days, pressured fish, no wind, absolute worst conditions for jig fishing, but we're still able to get bit on that micro Fitzgerald tungsten football jig with the 3-inch Damiki Air Craw. You can drag it around when it's tough and you can still get these fish to bite. I've got it on 12-pound P-Line Fluorocarbon, and it's just a great finesse jig presentation. I promise you it will put more fish in the boat for you if you'll get out there and try it. Have some fun. I felt like I won't eat it. I felt that one eat it. Give him a little taste. God, he got it good too. There we go. There we go. That's all there is to fishing the Finesse football jig. Find you some nice rocks, hard bottom. It could be clay, it could be shell beds, could be anything offshore. Drag that Finesse football jig on it with that 3-inch Damiki Air Craw. I guarantee you'll get bites and you'll have a lot of fun doing it.